I now have all the parts I need to start putting things together, but I was going to use this billet impeller, but the bearings don't fit. You can see the short video I did on that. So I'm going to go back to the brand new OEM style impeller. I was hoping to go with the billet impeller, but time constraints will not allow for that. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting the seals and bearing into the water pump housing and get that in the engine again and show you how that's done. The first thing I'm going to do is clean up this bore. You can see some residual sealant in there, and what I'm going to do is use some of this CRC gasket remover. It's for gaskets and sealants, so I'm going to give that a shot. Spray some on a paper towel and see if I can get that stuff out of there. So that looks pretty good. Looks really good, actually. And I'm going to clean that out with some simple green, just so we don't have this nasty chemical stuff in there. This is also good for powder coat. If you need to remove some what you think is paint and you try to wire brush it or whatever to get it off and it's just clogging up your brush or your sandpaper, it's probably powder coat, and this removes it pretty good. All right, that looks pretty good. So now, first thing I'm going to do is push this bearing in, and I'm going to use my handy dandy clutch tool for installing a bearing. I believe this is 1/2 inch. Of course not. Actually, I think that's probably metric, but 9/16 seems to fit. And that bearing looks like it's going in very nicely. I'm going to center up these washers. And it feels like that's about it. So that went in very nicely. Felt like it bottomed out and it's not protruding above that face. So next is going to be the oil seal. You want to, per the manual, you want to Give that a little bit of lubrication with some tap water or coolant. So I have a little bit of coolant behind me. I'm going to grab that, put a couple dabs on here, and push it in by hand at first. And then you want to have a socket big enough that will bottom out on the lip that's in there. So that way it'll be pushed in evenly all around. Also, you want to have that side towards the bearing, this side towards the impeller. That went in perfectly. Next is the fluid seal. So this has a ring of sealant around it. It's got this lip. This side goes towards the impeller, this side towards the bearing. Goes in like that, and it needs to be pressed. This 22mm socket appears to be the perfect size. I'm just going to tap it in. Just tap it in. And there we go. Next is the damper. Put a little bit of coolant on the flanges. There's little tiny flanges there. And then this will drop right on the shaft, impeller shaft, white side up, which is the right side up. Then you just push it in. Make sure it's not set above that flange or that face. And that's all that takes. Next step is installing the impeller into the housing. And again, I'm just going to lube it up a little bit with some coolant. And that's spring loaded because of that fluid seal. So this is where the clip comes in. This is a little bit too tight to do by hand, so be very careful when using pliers. There you go. Next are the pins for the gear. Let's drop those in. And the gear goes boss towards the housing. and then another clip. New impeller installation is complete. The next step is replacing the bearing on the engine side, and I showed you that, I think, in part 1 of this whole job. And I'm going to leave this cover off at this point because when you install the pump housing, this needs to go on the inside diameter of the bushing, the bearing, and then the gear needs to mesh with the counterbalancer gear. So if you need to, you'll be able to turn this a little bit and get the gears to mesh. So I'm going to change out that bearing, and then we'll install the pump housing, and then after that we'll install the cover. All right, here we are at the clutch side or water pump side of the engine, and this bearing has a snap ring. Don't know if you can see that. I can barely see it. I need new glasses. And there it goes. Now, I don't know how tight this bearing is in here, but after I find that clip, or that snap ring, I will show you how the slide hammer works on bearings. In part 2, I believe it was part 2, I showed you the slide hammer. That's not the slide hammer part. This is the slide hammer part, but this is the part that interfaces with the bearing, and I'm going to put that in now. Let's see if we can't get this out. And it looks like the frame is going to be in the way, so this ought to be fun. Okay, got a couple of threads engagement there. So let's give this a shot. Oh, sometimes that happens. It slipped out without pulling the bearing. So I'm going to take this off just because it's a lot easier to handle without the handle on there. Handle. Might need to get a wrench on there. There's a couple of flats right there. And then 3/4 inch. Tighten that up a little bit. And let's try popping this out again. Okay. There we go. Not so bad. All right, so I'm going to try to get this bearing in without too much trouble. There's no way I can press it, so I'm going to use this 19mm socket and give it another tappy tap. And you are right in my way, so I'm going to move you. So I'm going to lube this bearing up, outside diameter, with a little bit of oil. And I'm going to use a little bit more persuasion this time. feeling around trying to see if there's a high spot. Seems like about the 10 o'clock position is a little bit high. So I'll try to tap that down a little bit. This is not the greatest position for swinging a hammer on a bearing that's in a vertical position. There we go, getting somewhere now. There we go. There you go, hear that? That's fully seated. And check bearing, make sure it's smooth, and it is. And now we're going to try to get the snap ring back in. Looks like it's in. What I did there is I intentionally took it out of the groove so I can push it in and snap it in. And now I know for sure it's in the groove. One thing I forgot to mention in the previous videos is when you're taking this apart, make sure that this dowel pin is there and that one is there also. You can line that up later on when you put it back together. All right, we're back at the bench and we're just going to go ahead and put these seals in, get this ready to put on the engine. This is kind of like an O-ring, but not exactly. It's got these tabs you have to push in, and it's kind of nice because it makes it self-stick, I guess you can say. Basically, it jams itself in there. So that is, looks like that seal is in. This guy, same thing. It's got these little tabs. I don't like how that's lined up. Yeah, that corner is a little off. All right, I like that better. All right, that should be good. Ready to go on the engine. All right, let's see if the camera will stay there while I put this in. Again, I'm leaving the cover off so I can have access to the impeller just for that reason, so it can mesh with the gears. There we go. Oops. Nope, don't want that one. If you saw my other video, you can remember I have marks on these bolts. So this is a blue mark, and that corresponds with that blue mark there. Gold mark on this one corresponds with that one there. And that one's in the wrong spot. So that's another gold mark. Where'd it go? Yeah, I think it's this one. Might have had it marked on the cover. Yeah, this one doesn't go there yet. Need the cover on there before. Put that there. But that is basically it. The pump is back in, and it's lined up with the gear. And I'll tighten this up, and we'll be all set, ready for the cover. So back at the bench again, I'm going to put the seal on the cover, but I made a mistake. There's a whole lot more screws that or bolts that go through the cover before we can tighten that pump up. There's the 3 Phillips head screws that stay with the cover that capture the cover onto the pump housing, but the rest of the bolts go through the cover, through the housing, and into the engine to mount it. So I'm going to end up taking some of those off and reinstalling them after I get the cover on. But for now, let's do this. See if I can get you a better shot here. Yeah, it looks a little better. We'll do the seal. Now this one does not have the tabs like the other one. So we're just gonna have to put it in and take our chances, I guess. Oh. Okay. All right, it's just gonna sit there, and I'll bring it back to the engine. I will probably just go ahead and put this on without you because I think I'm going to be fumbling around for a bit. Well, I got lucky. I didn't have to take out any bolts that were already in there. So now I'm just going to get the rest of these in where they need to be. And I'm going to look up the torque spec for these. I think it's 8.9 or something like that. Foot-pounds, something real small. But I'm going to torque them, and I'm going to button this up, and I'm running low on battery. So I'm going to end this video here. that is basically it for the water pump and impeller. Thanks for watching.